guys, welcome back to Queens of the Damned, a horror podcast. So this week we decided to talk about some unsolved mysteries. Nikki and Rachel chose murder mysteries, and I ended up choosing a very recent conspiracy theory. So we did kind of a sandwich thing. Nikki started with her murder mystery, then I went into my conspiracy theory, and then Rachel went into her murder mystery. At the end, we decided to talk about some of the unsolved mysteries that we thought about doing but decided not to do, and we do end up covering them a little bit by the end as well. Some of them are kind of popular, so you may have heard about them already. Yeah, we hope you guys really enjoy the episode, and thanks for listening.
So this week I want to talk about a Jane Doe case. It is the Lady of the Dunes. Has anyone heard of this one before?
That sounds kind of familiar, but not like that I would know any detail.
Okay, I'll go on with the details and you can tell me if you've heard of it before. So, in 1974, on July 26th, a little girl walking her dog in the Race Point Dunes in Provincetown, Massachusetts, found a female body. Police estimate that she had lay there for over 2 weeks. Her body was badly decomposed naturally because of insect activity, and she was naked and lying face down on a green beach towel. Someone had also folded a pair of Wrangler jeans and a blue bandana and placed them under her head as some sort of pillow. The cause of death was determined as blunt force trauma to the skull, and her killer had... By the way, sorry, this is going to be a little bit graphic, so people who are triggered by this stuff might want to skip the next, 30 seconds. But, so the cause of death was blunt force trauma to her skull, and her killer had removed both of her hands and several of her teeth to prevent identification, presumably. In addition, she was sexually assaulted with a wooden object after her murder, and she'd also been nearly decapitated, and some people are saying that's because of strangulation. So they strangled her so hard that her head almost came off.
Is that humanly possible?
I don't know. I mean, with some sort of object, I suppose.
Yeah, like a
wire
rope
or something.
Okay.
She had several expensive crowns in her mouth, the cost of which were $5,000 in 1975. So that's kind of a big identifying marker, you would think, for a person, because that's some pretty expensive dental work. And her body was found only 50 yards from a road. Police discovered tire tracks in the vicinity. So that's all they had. Everything else is pure speculation. So the suspects, one was Haddon Clark, who's a serial killer who was caught, and while he was in prison, he confessed to murdering this lady, but he's a paranoid schizophrenic, and he claimed that his alternate personality, which is funny because isn't that DID and not paranoid schizophrenia? Anyway, he claimed that his alternate personality, who is a woman named Kristen, was responsible for killing this woman, but the police couldn't find any evidence of his involvement, couldn't corroborate it at all. So they kind of think that he made it up. And then there's another suspect named James Bulger, who is a famous Irish-American mobster who was known to remove his victims' teeth after death. He also was known to frequent a gay bar very near where the lady was found.
Wait, is this Whitey Bulger?
Whitey Bulger, yes.
Okay. I know who he is because I think he just went to prison. Finally.
Oh, did he just go to prison?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like a few years ago.
Yes, this is 1975.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
And so a few years ago, he just went to prison. Great, good to know.
Obviously not for this, but yeah.
No, but I'm sure he's killed tons of people and gotten away with it.
Oh yeah.
But his motive was probably preparing her for sex slavery, and a woman he killed before, or was known to have killed, had the same identifying markers on her afterwards. He'd removed her teeth, she was naked, I think he cut off both of her hands, and also nearly decapitated her. So for me, that's kind of case closed in a way, but they haven't been able to pin it on him. Her killer would now be in his 70s, so time is a little bit running out to try to figure out who this lady was. And now, on to who she possibly could be. A couple people came forward. One in 1987, a woman confessed to a Mountie that she saw her father strangle a woman the same year that the lady was found. But after this information reached the police in Provincetown, they attempted to locate her for an interview, but she had moved to Montreal by that time, so they never found her again and were never able to further interview her. And then, this is my favorite. So Joe Hill, Stephen King's son.
This is why I've heard of this.
No.
Yep.
Is this why you've heard of it?
This is why I've heard of this. Yep.
Miranda, have you heard of it?
No! But my first thought is, why does this always come back to Stephen King?
I have no
Every
idea.
episode.
I think... Speaking of conspiracies, there's something going on with Stephen King. So, all the way, fast forward to 3 years ago in 2015, Joe Hill was watching Jaws. Yes, the film Jaws. And he speculated that the Lady of the Dunes could have been an extra in the film. And you can see her in the 4th of July scene, and she's wearing a blue bandana and a pair of Wrangler jeans, like the ones that were folded and put underneath her head, and she looks eerily similar to her. Now, this film was shot, it was either the year of or the year before she was found, only about 100 miles from Race Point Dunes. So you can think about that. I mean, Joe Hill thinks it's wild speculation. He just noticed it. So you can do with that what you will. But I think it's super weird.
That's so strange.
They have exhumed her body 3 times. Once they did it in 1980 to do a clay facial reconstruction. Once they did it in 2000 for a CT scan to do a better facial reconstruction and to collect some of her DNA. And then again, 5 years ago in 2013. And I couldn't find out why they did that, but presumably it was for more DNA testing. Since everyone's getting their DNA tested nowadays, they might find a match some way, I think. But this crime novelist, and I can't remember her name, she claimed that she saw the body while she was walking her dog. She wasn't the one who reported it, but she saw the body while she was walking her dog when she was a teenager, and she wrote a novel about the Lady of the Dunes, and they interviewed her for like Fox in Boston, and they said if nothing else, all this woman deserves is her name. So I thought it was like this really, so like Jane Doe cases for me are always like so creepy and so sad, because it's just this woman who usually has been brutalized and no one can somehow figure out who she is. And then you think, like, what if that was me, like, someday and nobody could figure out who I was?
Right. That is definitely creepy.
Yeah, that poor lady, like, I can't believe she had that expensive dental work and everything, and they've consulted over 50 dentists to try to figure out who she was, and even with dental records, they can't figure it out.
Wow.
And that's such a disturbing thought for me. And I picked a Jane Doe case out of thousands of Jane Doe cases. This is just one of them. So there are just thousands of missing, or thousands of women whose bodies have been found who nobody knows who they are. Wow. And there's a website you can go to called the Jane Doe Network, and web sleuths go on there and try to figure out who these women are. But they've been logged by the thousands on the internet. So if you're bored one day, go do some good work and try to peruse the network. You never know. Sometimes it's just a coincidence of someone seeing something and then a 50-year cold case is solved.
Weird.
Yeah. Also, speaking of weird, new one that has surfaced recently.
Yes. It actually surfaced the beginning of this month, which, I don't know, it's crazy to me that it hasn't been around that long, but people have been talking about it so much. So, this one doesn't really have a title. It's kind of, when I was trying to do research for it, it was kind of hard, like, what do I search? Because no one really has a name for it. So I just called it the They Are Not Human voicemail conspiracy. And it all started out with a post made by a Twitter user with the handle Straight Away. And in that voicemail, the voicemail was all in military code. It was this long string of military code words with a series of numbers at the end of it. And when one Twitter user sat down and kind of decoded it, and the message had stated, "Danger, SOS, it is dire for you to evacuate, be cautious, they are not human, danger, SOS," and then followed by that series of numbers. This Twitter user, his name is Ty, he claims that he got the message when he was driving, so he just didn't answer it, and he didn't recognize the number. But I found this thread on 4chan that is just absolutely insane. I haven't even gotten to the bottom of it. I haven't even seen all of it yet because there's so much to it. But some 4chan users traced the phone number that this voicemail came from to a genome sequencer in China. I don't know how they did it. I found that, like, on Reddit and 4chan, they don't explain how they get their information, they just somehow do. So, everything here, kind of take it with a grain of salt. But, basically, everything blew up after he received this voicemail and he posted it. A few days before this happened, though, the Twitter user had commented on the fact that he was sitting in his car at 3 a.m. down the street from his house. He was smoking a cigarette or something. And he saw some man standing outside of his house taking pictures of his house with the flash on. And, you know, there are pictures of him making this tweet before he even posted the voicemail. So it's easy to believe that this did actually happen to him, or at least that he didn't think it was going to be related or whatever. But after he ended up posting the voicemail, he started getting messages from fake accounts on Twitter. They were like accounts that were just like random letters for their handle and didn't have any pictures, didn't have any posts. They had just been created kind of accounts. And they were all in different languages or in Morse code. And when he posted all of these, the Twitter users, you know, ran different stuff through Google Translate and everything. And all of the messages were a little different, but they were all very ominous and really just creepy in general. One message that was in Morse code was telling him to delete the video and the message that he had just posted. Another was, or appeared to be a distress message asking him for help, that they were being attacked by devilish beings, was the language that they used. Another message said that the voicemail was related to Stephen Hawking's death, who had apparently said, who apparently had said that something bad was going to happen in 2018. I never heard about that, but that's somebody said that.
I feel like everyone figured out that something bad was going to happen in 2018.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and then one of the messages had like a bunch of just random numbers in it, and a lot of them looked like coordinates, but one of them looked like a date, and the date on it was April 18th, 2018, and then the message after it translated to something about that day being the rapture. So, that was all of the Twitter stuff. That was the stuff that I originally saw when all of this first came out. But then you go to 4chan, you go to this thread on 4chan, and it is just insane. Because it's all these people trying to solve whatever this could be. So there is speculation that this SOS message came from the black box from the Malaysian airline MH370 that disappeared, because on that same day there had been solar flares.
I love how it's always solar flares.
I don't know.
It's always solar flares.
Yes, but somehow the solar flares boosted the signal so that it was transmitted somehow to a phone.
But now?
Yes.
Why now?
I don't know. I don't know. They don't really explain why now, but that's the theory, is that it was just a transmission from the black box.
But they've never found the black box.
I know.
I was obsessed with this plane. Let me tell you. I
don't really know anything about the plane. I just know that this is one of the things that people...
It just disappeared.
This is the plane that just vanished.
Well, I know that, because I remember hearing about it when it happened.
I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with this plane. It was so stupid. But yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, let me get further into this. It's gonna get a little crazier. So... The series of numbers that followed the SOS message, some people have looked into it as coordinates, and it apparently is on the coast of Indonesia, in an area that they think the plane might have disappeared. So that was that was kind of the major conspiracy behind it, but one of the 4chan users thinks that it has something to do with a freighter, because black boxes don't transmit messages, but freighters do. So he was thinking maybe it's something to do with that. Some people have said that the number that's at the end of the message is a phone number, and when it's called, it's actually an emergency number, like a 911, and that it hangs up on itself. You can't even really do anything with it, it just hangs up. And then some have tried to link it to Cicada 3301. Have you guys heard of this?
No.
Oh my god, I hadn't heard of it either. But apparently it was a huge deal. So, Cicada was this internet puzzle. It's an anonymous group where they had put out these, like, coding puzzles, and they were doing it to find, like, really, really intelligent people, apparently. And the way that their puzzles were created was kind of similar to the messages that this guy was receiving after he posted the voicemail, or the voicemail. And so some people think that maybe it's the beginning of a new Cicada puzzle. Apparently these puzzles were, like, huge on the internet. The first one came out in 2012, and then another one came out a year later in 2013. I never heard of it.
Me either, but that sounds fun.
So who was trying to find intelligent people, and in what for?
No one knows. It's like, it's almost, from what I read about it, it sounds like it's almost like anonymous. No one knows who it is or why they do what they do. They just do things. And the weird thing about the Cicada group is that no one is linked to it. Absolutely no one. Like, it being such a big deal, you would think that someone would try to take credit for it and make some kind of money off of it. But no one has come out and claimed Cicada, and it's still around. Like, their Twitter is still on, or is still active, and they're still using it every day. And the people who have completed the puzzles and have won hardly say anything about it either. They just simply say that they were in search for intelligent individuals. And that's all anyone will say about it. So the people who won either don't know, or they can't say anything.
Weird.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Everybody is linking this to whatever they can, it seems like, because it is really strange. But there have been a few different people who have come out and said that they received the voicemail as well. There was one Reddit user who received the message, and he actually answered the phone, and he hung up because he didn't think it was anything, but I think he received it again, but he got it as a voicemail. And so he had it in the same medium as the original person who posted it. And he stated that the way that the message was played was that it was more like a broadcast than anything else, because you can tell from the way that it's done that it starts with an S, almost like it was on repeat. Like, it started and ended with SOS, and it just kept repeating over and over again. So not even like an automated message where it can tell when you've picked up the phone and when you've hung up the phone. It's just on a loop. So, but he also linked it to NATO and said, like, if you answered the phone and you heard this message, you wouldn't
going everywhere.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what's going on. But okay, then it gets weirder. So this guy,
weirder.
Yes,
are you kidding?
Yes, this guy, this Reddit user, thinks that. Okay, he wasn't exactly clear where he got all of this, to be honest with you, but he linked it somehow to genome sequencing. It had something to do with the numbers that the message portrayed. He had different numbers in his than the original guy did somehow. And he said that the numbers that he had were related to genome sequencing. And this guy thinks that the government has been messing with genome codes of humans, and that is why in the message we hear they are not human. So his theory is that the government is making these like creatures from human beings, and that is what somehow did something to this plane. And that's why you hear they are not human. But his theory relates back to that 4chan thread where they said that the number was linked to a man in China that worked with genome sequencing. And these were two completely unrelated threads. And then...
No, I can't handle anymore.
There's one more. There's one more.
Turned around.
Holy shit.
So, this guy on this 4chan thread apparently was doing a lot of research into the voicemail messages and into this Malaysian airplane that went and disappeared. And he found this video. Apparently, okay, I watched the video, and this guy apparently does a lot of these videos of like conspiracy theories and whatnot. And he found an article that came out, I think it came out not that long after the plane disappeared. He never said where the article came from, but in this article, this reporter claimed that a picture had been sent from the Diego Garcia military base, which is on an island out in the Indian Ocean, and this picture was attached to a message in which he says that the plane was hijacked and taken to this military base, and that the plane and all of the people that are on the plane have been taken hostage and they're being held in this military base. And this YouTuber's theory is that the plane is being held in a Faraday cage, so that no one can contact anyone from the outside world. The man in the message said that he had been blindfolded and possibly drugged. And the way that they linked it to the Diego Garcia military base was because pictures, if you have GPS on or something, images are linked to a GPS or something like that. I don't know. It was way too technologically inclined for me to understand, but there is apparently somehow you cannot change certain things about the information that come with pictures, and one of them is a location. And someone else got a hold of this picture and did a bunch of, like, he ran it through a bunch of editing software and found, like, an exact location of where it came from and, like, a building where it came from and all of that kind of stuff. That is as far as I got. But
weird.
Apparently, this plane is being held by the government and there are aliens on it.
My thing is, if this is a hostage situation, isn't there usually a negotiation that follows, and therefore we would know about that?
Well, I think I think they're saying that they're being held hostage because something non-human got out and got on this plane somehow, and they just took this plane and all of the people that were on it and just put them in this military base.
Why wouldn't they just kill them all and it would be over?
Well, they could be dead. The article is from a long time ago. I'm pretty sure the article came out not that long after the plane disappeared, so they could all be dead.
Well, and then...
Oh my god.
That's so funny that that's what that article says, because I remember when that picture came out, and the story around it at the time was that actually it had been hijacked by the Russians, who were going to use it for some kind of... I think it was the Russians, who were going to use it for some kind of, like, bombing mission, or maybe it was the Al-Qaeda, I can't remember. Somebody who was going to use it for some kind of suicide bombing mission. So it was in the jungles of somewhere.
Interesting.
So I think it's just the same picture.
It probably is. It probably is, but people had different interpretations of whatever they thought it was.
Yeah, that plane was weird, though. It is very strange that it went down and they have never found it.
Well, when I was looking into all of this, I read, I think it's even on just the Wikipedia page for the airplane, but apparently Malaysia is made an agreement with, I think, our government or something, and they're like funding some project to like scour the ocean.
Probably.
And it's going on right now, I believe. But they haven't found anything yet, but I guess they're looking for it.
Yeah, like I think they did a really bad job in the initial search from what I remember, and like nobody was sharing information with each other. Like China had some information that they weren't sharing with Malaysia, but like Malaysia had information that like it didn't share with anybody else, and like it was just like this huge clusterfuck of nobody sharing information. Like the families didn't know what was happening, and so I think it was just a really bad investigation, and it's too late. The pieces are too scattered and sunk, and they're just never.
Yeah.
They're never gonna find it.
You don't think that there's a possibility that it was hijacked and that the people were killed and that it could be used for something?
No.
I mean, barring the non-human thing.
What if they were abducted by aliens? They would never know.
Well, and I think they found pieces of the plane.
Okay.
I feel like...
Okay. I thought there was some debris that had been recovered.
Yeah, I feel like maybe last year or the year before, they found pieces of a plane on an island that had washed up. They thought it was from this plane. But my question is, like, what happened? Why did it crash?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I knew someone who worked for Boeing in Washington, and he said you would not believe the shit that goes wrong with those planes.
That's good to know.
Oh, that's true. But I think what was so weird is that the plane turned off of its flight path, and then it just, like, went dark. So they didn't know if, like, they had lost consciousness, and that's why it went dark.
And if everyone's unconscious, then it doesn't matter, right?
Right, because that was the only thing that they could figure out. Because in theory, if something had been going wrong with the plane, wouldn't they have been, like, radioing in? Like a mayday?
They would have communicated
and said there was
right?
no communication for hours, and they just dropped off.
That's what they're saying that voicemail is, though. Some message from that plane. Which I am not placing it in any form of reality, but, like, that is how they're fitting it in.
But then how did it get to this random dude on Twitter's phone?
I have no idea.
The solar flares, Rachel.
Come on!
I forgot about the solar flares.
It makes sense!
It's always the solar flares. 4 years later.
Well, I guess the moral of this unsolved mystery is that the Malaysian airline was taken over by pod people that we created, and it's being held in a government base. And there are pod people all around us.
Wow.
I just don't know what to do now. Rachel, bring us back down to earth with some murder.
I'm bringing us back down to earth with... I don't know why I keep picking cases with kids, but here I am again. I'm doing they're known as the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. So they happened on July 13th, 1977 at Camp Scott in Mays County, Oklahoma. There were 3 victims: Lori Farmer, who was 8, Doris Milner, who was 10, and Michelle Guys, who was 9. In the lead up to the murders, so in April of 1977, they were doing a weekend Girl Scout camp, and it was cut short due to cabins being ransacked. Later in April, there was a training session for the counselors, and a counselor came back to her cabin and discovered her belongings had been gone through, and she'd had a box of donuts, and the donuts were gone. And inside the empty donut box was a note that included the line, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1. They ended up disregarding the note. They thought it was a prank. There were, statements... Well, but there were statements in the note about, Martians and, stuff that was just crazy. I mean, that was kind of the, standout line, but there was enough that... they figured it was just someone playing a joke. Anyway, so this was the 70s. It was a different time. It was a more innocent time. So on the night of the murders, there was a huge thunderstorm. So everybody stayed in their tent. The 3 victims were in tent number 8, which was part of the Chippewa unit. They were the furthest from the counselor's tent, and their tent was partially obscured by the showers. So at 1:30 a.m., Counselor Carla Wilhite heard moaning from a camp trail approximately 150 yards from Tent 8. She went out in the storm with her flashlight, but she couldn't find the source of the sound, and she thought it was an animal, and so she went back to sleep. At 2 a.m., a girl in tent 7, so right next to tent 8, tent 7 in the same unit, woke up to someone pulling the tent flap back, shining a flashlight inside, and then leaving. She couldn't make out their features. She could just tell that it was an adult.
Oh my god, tent 7, the Survivor's Guild tent.
Exactly.
Seriously?
Exactly. All of these girls, it has to be, but yeah, especially them. So at 3 a.m., a girl in a tent in the Cherokee unit heard a scream. And at about the same time, a girl in the, I feel like I'm going to mispronounce this, Cawpaw unit, she heard someone cry, "Mama, Mama." She thought that it was Lori's voice, was one of the victims. They had attended camp together before, so she knew her. But she also knew that Lori suffered from nightmares, so she didn't go get the counselor because she thought she was having a bad dream. So the next morning at 6 a.m., Counselor Wilhite, the one who heard the moaning, got up to take a shower. Near where she had heard the moaning, she saw 3 sleeping bags under a tree. She went to go investigate, and she found the girls deceased. The first one she saw was Denise, who was nude from the waist down and had her hands duct taped behind her back. So Michelle and Lori died from blunt force trauma, and Denise had been strangled after the blow to the head failed to kill her, and they had all been raped. Basically, so the police come out right away. The Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation basically takes over, and they find some clues at the scene of the crime. They find a roll of black duct tape. They find a flashlight with green plastic taped over the lens, and they did find a fingerprint on the flashlight. Inside the flashlight, they find pieces of a torn-up newspaper, a copy of Tulsa World from April 17th. And then they also find that someone had burglarized some of the tents in the middle of the night. Some of the girls were missing some items, and one of the counselors was missing a pair of sunglasses. So kind of immediately they come up with a suspect, this guy named Gene Leroy Hart. He had been convicted of raping 2 pregnant women in 1966. While paroled for that crime, he burglarized several homes and was sentenced to 305 years in prison in 1970. He escaped in September of 1973 and had not been recaptured, obviously.
Oh
yeah. And his mother lived half a mile from the camp. So 3 days after the murder, this would be June 20th, in a cave 3 miles south of the camp, they found photographs of 2 women. They found a roll of black duct tape with green plastic stuck to it, and they found the rest of the April 17th copy of Tulsa World. And they also found the sunglasses that had been stolen from a counselor. So they were able to trace the 2 photographs of the women to a man named Lewis Lindsay. He had been a guard at the prison where Gene Hart was held, and he was also an amateur photographer. And he would develop his photos at the prison, and Hart would help him develop the pictures. So the police, their theory was basically that he kept copies of these 2 pictures. So this is how they tied him to the murders. So they went on this giant manhunt for 10 months. Now, Gene Hart was Native American. There's a lot of racial tension around this case. A lot of people felt like the white police were targeting him, so he was hidden for 10 months with various Native American families. But they end up finding him on April 6th, 1978. They do arrest him for the crime, and basically the trial is a complete shit show. So it turns out that the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation did a horrible job. They contaminated the crime scene, they mishandled the evidence, they basically fucked the whole thing up. So at the scene of the crime, they found a bloody handprint. Turns out it belonged to an Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation agent.
Oh my god.
They found a shoe print at the crime scene, but it was too small to be Gene Hart's. The fingerprint on the flashlight also did not belong to him.
Don't fucking touch anything. Seriously?
Yeah.
I know you don't have DNA evidence yet,
but they
seriously.
had fingerprints. They had fingerprints back then. And they were obviously able to get pictures, at least, if not an imprint of the shoe print, that they could have matched to him. But unfortunately, what does this show a jury? Somebody else was probably there. How are we supposed to believe it was him when there's all this evidence saying it's not him? Right?
Right. If you were in that courtroom as a juror, would you have convicted him? No, because they fucking messed this shit up. There's no way. There's no evidence.
Exactly. So there was also semen found on the bodies of the girls. Hart had had a vasectomy. Now, they did point out in court that doesn't mean that you necessarily stop producing semen, but it makes it less likely. At the house where Hart was found hiding out, they found a pipe and a mirror that belonged to the girls that had been stolen from them on the night of the murder. Unfortunately, they found it on their second search of the cabin, which led the defense to say they probably put it there.
It was planted.
It was planted, especially because the man who owned the cabin, who had been staying with Hart there, said he'd never seen those before. He testified, I've never seen it. It wasn't there when I was there, so they must have planted it. So the defense also presented an alternate suspect, a man named Bill Stevens. He was a convicted rapist. He had some friends who said that he had borrowed a similar flashlight from them. And one of the Girl Scouts testified that she saw a man who looked like him hanging around the camp that day. So obviously he was found not guilty. It took the jury less than 24 hours to find him not guilty. They all said that they had reasonable doubt, the evidence wasn't there, and the investigation was basically a huge mess. So that's about it. Hart died of a massive heart attack. He was obviously returned to prison to finish his original sentence. He died of a massive heart attack about a year later. Some of the investigators think that he was poisoned by the other prisoners because they thought that he had killed these girls. No one else has ever been charged. In 2007, DNA was run on hair and semen found at the crime scene, but the samples were too degraded. And then just a couple of months ago, they raised funding and are beginning to run more advanced DNA tests on the samples to see if they can find a match. So that's it. I mean, these poor little girls went off to camp, were brutally murdered. Nobody's ever been held accountable for it. I feel horrible for that counselor. Though what could she have done? She probably would have just been killed too. Mm-hmm. And so obviously she couldn't do anything.
I don't know. Do you think he did it? Or...
Oh, I think he probably did it. Yeah. But if I had been on that jury, I definitely would have found him not guilty.
Right. Me too, because
there was no evidence. That was their thing. There was really no evidence. I mean, they had the photographs that he had supposedly stolen. But even then, I mean, that's such like a nebulous connection. That was really all they had. The fingerprint wasn't his. The shoe print wasn't his. The handprint wasn't his. None of the physical evidence at the scene matched him.
If that DNA had still been good, they would have been able to figure out if it was him or not.
Yeah.
That's so frustrating.
I know. It's horrible. And like I read an interview with like one of the moms of the girls from this year. And it's just awful. I mean, obviously she's just never gotten over it and is never going to get over it. I mean, she's just like, I wish I hadn't let her go. And, like one of the girls, they found a note, like she'd written a letter to her parents that they found in the tent that was like, oh, I made 2 new friends. I just couldn't wait to write you. I'm so excited. It was horrible. And like it seems like the families like kind of think that Hart did it, but also they're not like completely convinced, or they think if he did do it, he maybe had help.
Right, because you think about his first crime, which is awful, don't get me wrong, but like escalating from raping 2 women to kidnapping, raping, and murdering 3 children.
Right.
And then having the balls to stick around afterwards and just like rob tents, apparently.
Right.
What
it's so strange. It's very strange. And like I said, there was a lot of the articles I saw just kind of alluded to the like racial divide that this case caused. Of course, the Native American community did not trust the white police, which, like, why would they? I wouldn't either. We kind of tried to wipe them out, you know, so then it just became this huge, oh my god, of course they're trying to pin it on him. And that's why he was able to hide. And then the jury, like, they purposefully excluded any Native American jurors because they knew for sure if they put Native American jurors on there, they were going to vote not guilty. So they even tried to, like, stack the jury against him. And it didn't work. So even then, you know that the case was really weak.
So that bloody handprint, you said was
one of the agents.
So he was there? Like that, I don't...
So the girls were bludgeoned to death. So he would have been out like there, like, after. Handling the evidence, handling the bodies, gotten blood on his hands, went back in the tent, and touch something, and there was why wasn't he wearing gloves? I don't know, but...
Yeah, forget those latex gloves. Let's go play around in the blood. What the fuck? They had latex gloves back then, right?
Yes, they did, and like I said, they had... I mean, being able to match fingerprints is super old. Way, 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 way before the 70s. So, why they weren't being more careful, I don't know. And this was not like the local sheriff who had never dealt with this. This was the State Bureau of Investigation. They're supposed to be these specially trained agents who are called in to deal with this kind of thing. And they still fucked it up so bad.
Just reminds me too much of JonBenet Ramsey.
Yeah, they fucked that shit up.
If they didn't mess all of that up, they probably would have found who it was.
The big thing with JonBenet was that they took her parents' word for it at the beginning, and they didn't search the house.
Yep.
And if they had searched the house and found her right away, but they treated the parents too much. I mean, we all know the brother did it. Yep. They treated the parents too much with kid gloves. And that was just, like, I think investigative failures was a lot of it. This was just straight up, like, stomping through the crime scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I chose. So, I mean, this is another one. Was it solved? Probably. I don't know. I could buy that he did it. I can also buy that he didn't do it. Like Nikki said, that's a huge escalation. As far as I know, he had not been accused. I was not able to find anything about him being accused of child molestation before this. So it just seems so strange that he would, like she said, go straight to molesting and murdering kids, you know?
On such, like, a huge scale, too. It's like, if you think about, hey, your last child murderer, Fish.
Right.
He would get one child alone, right?
Yes.
And
he
then
would get one child alone.
I mean, well, I guess if you're that fucking crazy, 3 kids, I mean, they're not, you can't get inside that person's mind.
Well, right.
It's so difficult.
Right.
Maybe he thought it was a great idea, you know?
Again, yeah, it's just so strange. And like I said, there is no... And also, there was no further investigation done after he was found not guilty. As far as the police were concerned, he did it. And when he was found not guilty, they were like, well, the court let the killer walk free. I guess that's it.
That's fucked up. Do you want to talk about our runners-up?
Yeah, because I had a couple.
For a little bit?
I had a couple.
And then Miranda had one, too.
I did.
Yeah. I didn't have... Well, I had a runner-up that I shared with Rachel, but I wasn't going to do it because it was so popular. But it's just this amazing unsolved mystery. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to talk about it. I want Rachel to talk about it because I don't want to mess it up.
So, the one that we were going to do was the Tamam Shud case. We both considered it. This is my very favorite unsolved mystery. Like Nikki said, it's super popular. Tons of podcasts have done it. They've probably done a much better job than I would do. Seek them out. But basically, this is an unsolved, they assume murder. They don't even really know. But a man who was found dead in 1948 in Australia. So they find him dead on a beach. He was just laying there. He looked like he was asleep.
He was sitting up against a tree.
Yeah, well, his head was resting against, like, a seawall.
Oh, okay, a seawall.
Yeah, and they thought at first he had died while sleeping, right? Like, he had gone to the beach, he was taking a nap, and, you know, had an aneurysm or something and died. So they found an unlit cigarette on him. They found a train ticket that had been unused, a bus ticket that they couldn't prove if it had been used, a comb, a half-empty pack of juicy fruit chewing gum, a cigarette packet, and a box of matches. So some people came out and said they had seen him wandering around the night before, but like they thought he was drunk. Some people saw him laying down the night before, but they thought that he was asleep or, again, drunk, passed out. So they were just like, we're not getting involved with that, right? So, of course, they do a autopsy. He has no form of identification on him. He was white. They think he was about 40 to 45. He was in really good shape. He had, this is one of my favorite details, he had high calf muscles, like those of a ballet dancer. And so they thought that he may have been a runner at one point, like a marathon runner.
And his teeth.
Oh yeah, there's something with his teeth.
So he had a genetic anomaly where his canine teeth were right up against his front teeth. And literally 2% of all people have this. So I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, but later they found a woman who they thought was a relative of this man because she had this anomaly. And they still haven't figured out exactly who he is, although they think maybe there's one person who could have been him. But go on, there's more. There's even more. So
when they start searching his stuff even further at the medical examiner, he's wearing just like really like nondescript clothing, just like white shirt, tie, brown pants, nothing exciting. All of the labels have been cut out of his clothing. So there's no name brand. And he didn't have a hat, which for 1948 was unusual. And again, he did not have a wallet. There was no ID, he was clean shaven. So the police at first thought that he maybe had committed suicide. So they do the autopsy, and there was no heart condition. His heart was perfectly normal. There was no evidence of an aneurysm. But they do find some blood in his stomach that was mixed with food. They found blood in the liver, and his spleen was huge, like 3 or 4 times the normal size.
I forgot about that.
So the autopsy showed that the man's last meal was a pasty, which was eaten a few hours before he died, but they could not find any foreign substance in the body. They could not find any evidence of poison, but the coroner, that's how the coroner thinks he died. The coroner says he does not believe that the death could have been natural, but they couldn't figure out how he was given the poison, because they don't think it was in the food. Because the food did not test positive for any poison. So they basically embalm his body, and then they don't know what to do. So a couple weeks later, or maybe even a month later, I can't remember, they find a suitcase at a train station in Adelaide. And the label has been taken off the suitcase, but it had been checked into the coat room on November 30th, which was the day before he died. They believe that it was owned by the man found at the beach. Inside the suitcase, they find a dressing gown, slippers, 4 pairs of underwear, pajamas, shaving items, a light brown pair of trousers with sand in the cuffs, an electrician's screwdriver, a table knife cut down into a short, sharp instrument, a pair of scissors with sharpened points, a small square of zinc thought to have been used as a protective sheath for the knife and scissors, and a stenciling brush as used by third officers on merchant ships for stenciling cargo. So you know how they have the stencils of what's in the cargo box?
Yeah.
Yeah, they found the brush that would use that. So this is so weird, also in the suitcase was a thread card of Barber brand orange waxed thread, which was not available in Australia. And it's the same thread that was used to repair the lining in a pocket of the trousers the dead man was wearing. All identification marks on the clothing had been removed, but police found the name T. Keene on a tie, Keene on a laundry bag, and Keene on a couple of other items, all 3 with dry cleaning marks. So they believe that whoever removed the tags purposefully left Keen on the clothing because they knew it wasn't his name. They also found no spare socks in the case, which seemed very strange. Because if you're traveling...
I mean, he had 4 pairs of underwear.
Right. Clearly he was traveling for a few days.
Prepared.
But he didn't have any extra socks.
No more socks, though.
So they did a global search. There was no one with the first initial T and the last name Keen missing in any English-speaking country. And trying to find the dry cleaner, they also couldn't find anything. Basically, all that they were able to figure out from the case was that the dressing gown came from the United States, but it had not been imported, which means he had been to the United States, or someone had brought it to him from the United States. There's more. The poem. So then they do an inquest, which is what they do when there's a mysterious death. And they find a tiny piece of rolled up paper with the words "Tamam should" printed on it. It was found in a fob pocket, which is like a pocket that you would use for your watch. Like, you know how your jeans have like that tiny pocket above your main pocket? That's a fob pocket. It's like a leftover from when you would carry a pocket watch.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was a fob pocket that had been added to his pants. It did not come with this pocket. And inside they found this piece of paper with the words "Tamam should" printed on it. The other side of the paper was blank. So they figure out that this comes from a rare New Zealand edition of this epic poem called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And the phrase means ended or finished. This is like the last line of the book. So there's more.
Yeah, because then they find the book. I mean, you couldn't make this shit up. It's so crazy that it has to be real.
So they find his copy. So I'm sorry, someone finds the book in the trunk of a car at about the same time that the man's body was found. So once they do the inquest and they release this to the public, this person who found it, this man who found it, comes forward and he says, "I found this book. The type matches this piece of paper, and also this part of the book is missing." So inside the book, they find a telephone number, an unidentified number, and text that resembles an encrypted message, which they have never solved if it is in fact an encrypted message. So they call the telephone number, and it belongs to this nurse named Jo Thompson. So they find Jo, and she says, "I don't know him. I don't know why he would have had my phone number." And then they say, "Have you ever seen this book?" And she says, "Well, yes, I have a copy of it." And she still had her copy. Of this and I just want to emphasize, this is an incredibly rare printing. This is not like you could go to the local bookstore and find 50 copies of this edition of this poem.
So he's tracking this woman who has this other copy of this book?
Yes, she has the exact same edition, but she still has it.
And he or someone cuts out the final phrase in the book.
Sews it into his
and
pants.
puts it in his pocket. It is finished.
Yes, sews it into his pants.
Wow, I can construct a whole narrative about this.
For
that is
sure.
Probably just bullshit.
And that's kind of it. They never really find any other evidence. At some point, years after the burial, flowers start appearing on the grave. People have come forward claiming that they know him, but they don't really have any proof. And that's kind of it. There are no leads. A lot of people think that he was a spy, which kind of is what makes the most sense to me.
Right, but why the book?
I don't know.
I just want to know why he's tracking down
I don't
that
know.
book.
Good question. Why was he tracking down this woman?
Maybe he was a collector.
But why would he have this woman's phone number in the front of the book?
How does he know she has it?
Well, I mean, but you can track down rare editions of books. He might have found someone who knew someone who knew someone who knew who had
That's
the book.
true,
and
but
they
she
said, "Here's
says
your
he
phone
never
number."
contacted her. She'd never spoken to this man. She had no idea who he was. And, yeah, and that was it.
And the fact that this is sewn into his pocket means the book is important somehow. And then he's poisoned, but we don't know how.
We don't know with what. We don't know how. If you had gone to all of this trouble to find this rare edition of this book, why would you cut it up? I mean, it's just bizarre. And they basically don't know anything else. That's it. That's where the trail ends.
And that, like I said, they did find the woman who they thought was related to him, but I don't think she has any idea of why any of this.
I missed something else. I'm so sorry. I missed a big part of it. So, not only does she have a book, but she, once upon a time, had a different copy of the book. Right? Or it was the same edition, but she had a second copy. And she'd given it to an army lieutenant named Alf Boxall, who had been serving at the time in the Royal Australian Engineers. I mean, I guess it was like probably someone she was kind of dating. But after the war, she ended up moving to Melbourne and got married. So she had received a letter from him, and she told him that she was now married. So after this conversation, the police are like, well, this must be the dead guy, right? Because she gave him the book. However, in July 1949, they found him alive, and he still had the book, and it still had the words in it. So, he had no idea that any of this part was happening.
God.
Or he had no idea about this case. He was just kind of like, I'm sure he like saw it on the news, but he didn't know that they like thought he was dead for like a year. So yeah, so that was it. After it turned out that he wasn't the dead man, that was where I completely forgot about that. That was where it ended. Yes.
And then there's the woman who they think is related to him, but she obviously has no idea how any of that could have happened.
Yes.
They have somehow traced and think that this woman is related to him, and she knows, and she's talked to media and everything, but no one has any fucking idea what was going on.
It's very strange.
I don't know.
It's very strange.
That was one of the things that got me hooked on Unsolved Mysteries like that, because, oh my god, why?
Yes, and they
Why?
are like trying to get him like exhumed so that they can like do DNA tests on him and try and figure out who he is, but that hasn't happened yet. But yeah, it's very interesting. It's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, something like that costs a lot of money. So if it's just this dead guy who, because out of curiosity we want to know like what happened to him, why? I mean, someone has to fund that, right? They can't. I don't know if they would do that just out of curiosity. No family have come forward.
I don't know. This is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in the world, so I feel like people would.
I feel like organizations of web sleuths would come together to fund it, right?
You would think so.
I just want to know why he hasn't been exhumed.
I don't know.
So, as you were talking about this, I felt like I was remembering it. Like I'd heard it somewhere.
Yeah.
And this
Yes, it
is
is
the case that the Colorado Kid is based on.
Yes, it is.
And I was thinking about it the whole time, and I was like, is that based on a true story, or is it not?
Yeah, this is the case from the Colorado Kid.
Now I want to go reread it. And if I remember, God, I haven't read that book since like middle school, but they never solved it. But there was something to do with like him being in two places at once or something like that. If I remember correctly, I don't know, but that's funny.
So my other one that I was gonna do, I'm not gonna go into any details, but it was the Golden State Killer, aka the original Night Stalker, which is my favorite unsolved serial killer. I just finished the book by Michelle McNamara, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, that unfortunately she passed away while she was finishing it. I highly recommend everybody read it. It's really great. It's very, it's sad to read it because you certainly get, I mean, I definitely got the sense that had she lived, I think she could have come about, or as close as anyone could at this point. I mean, it's been so long.
Yeah.
It's been so long. The person who did it is probably dead. I feel like she would have gotten as close as you could get to solving it. So I highly recommend everybody read it. It's really great. Her writing is really great. Yep, read it. It's good.
And then Miranda almost did Elisa Lamb, which is another one that is like a huge, huge unsolved mystery, and everybody's probably heard of it. But there's this episode of True Crime Garage that kind of convinced me that it's not mysterious at all.
Me too.
And yeah, she had an episode, she went up there, and it was totally possible. She could have gotten in there, couldn't get out, took off all her clothes because of, what do they call it? Paradoxical undressing.
Yeah.
When you're suffering from hypothermia, you get really hot at one stage, and so you take off all your clothes, and then she just drowned, which is really sad. But they were trying to think of, like, and you should definitely go check out the episode where they covered it. But they talked about, like, the map of the roof and whether it was possible for her to climb up there and get in there, and they determined, yes, it was possible. And they also determined that it would have been harder for someone to carry her up there and forcibly put her in there, so that there probably wasn't anyone else involved, because it would have been just ridiculously hard for someone to carry her there. So, it's sad.
Well, how did she get up there?
There was a
though?
ladder
Because
that had been left by a maintenance man.
when I was reading about it, I thought they said there wasn't a ladder. And someone said the only way for her to get there would have been the fire escape. But there were alarms on the fire escape. And no alarms were
I don't know.
set
I
off.
think I read that too originally, but then when they looked into it further, that they said that a ladder had been left there and that she could have gotten up there.
Yeah.
And lifted the lid. And it would have been harder for someone to carry her up there by the ladder. And there was a ladder.
Yeah. How did she get it open, though? Because wasn't the lid, like, extremely heavy?
I mean, that's the thing is, like, how did she get the lid open? Then how did anyone else get the lid open? And so now we're in supernatural territory, which is obviously...
And it says, I'm looking here, it says that, so she was of Chinese descent. I think this case really took off in China. I think a lot of people went to this hotel to kind of investigate it. So apparently a Chinese tourist who had gone there to sort of investigate what happened to her posted himself climbing out the fire escape and onto the roof, posted a video of it.
Yeah.
So obviously the fire alarms were not. Yeah.
And this is the Hotel Cecil, which is not the best hotel in LA.
A whole bunch of people have died at this place, which is another thing.
Yeah, it has a bad reputation.
I read that Richard Ramirez had lived there for a while.
There were suicides, there were murders, this place has not a good reputation.
Wasn't this the inspiration for the hotel season of American Horror Story?
Yes,
this was the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was the hotel that the Black Dahlia...
I think this case had a lot to do with it. No, go ahead. What'd you say?
Oh, I was saying it was also the hotel that the Black Dahlia was last seen at before she was found. But I don't know. Like, yeah.
And wasn't she, like, bipolar and was not on her medication?
She was on her antidepressants, but she wasn't on her antipsychotics.
So she wasn't, like, on the mood stabilizer.
If you just... Yeah. Well, the ones that she was on apparently was not just a mood stabilizer, but also an antipsychotic. So she was just on her antidepressants, and so that can cause, like, a strong swing into a manic episode.
Well, and then also one of the other big questions was, like, how did she open the lid to the water tank? And I guess this guy who posted the video of him climbing up via the fire escape, when he got up there, 2 of the water tank lids were just open. So...
Oh my god.
Like, that's probably what happened. She probably climbed out the fire escape when she couldn't get the elevator to work. Because remember, there's that creepy video of her, like, going in and out of the elevator and, like, looking around in the elevator.
Yeah.
Acting like she's playing hide and seek with someone.
And
then, like, arguing with someone that isn't there.
That's so sad. This poor girl.
I mean, she was just on this big trip. She was going to go explore America on, like, a West Coast road trip. And it just went terribly wrong.
But yeah. So it kind of sounds like, to me, like Nikki said, she was having an episode... When she couldn't get the elevator to work, it seemed like a great idea to climb out the fire escape. So she climbed out the fire escape to the roof, saw the tank, was like, oh, I'm going to go swimming, and got stuck. That was it. So that's so sad.
Well, they said that the water tank lid was closed, though. Someone said there wasn't any way for her to close it from the inside.
I mean, it could have fallen shut on her. She could have closed it on I mean, I don't know. I just feel like it's so possible that that could happen. That I think these details surrounding the impossibility of her being able to get up there and being able to close it are just things that have surfaced because it's an unsolved
Because it's
mystery.
weird. And that video of
You
her in
know?
the elevator, I think, is
Yeah.
what really fueled it. Because
that really exacerbated the, like, mysteriousness.
because it's a weird
of the whole
video.
case.
It's a weird
It is
video.
weird because she's like peeking out and like waving and then hiding a little bit. But if you listen to the True Crime Garage episode, they talk about they had this behavior, like, body language analyst look at this video, and they said she looked very relaxed the entire time. So that she was kind of playing some sort of like casual game rather than, because some people were speculating, oh, she's like really scared of somebody and she's trying to get away from them, so she's hitting all the buttons and it's not working and she's looking out, and that's not at all what the behavior analyst said. That she was just like playing some sort of game.
Well, and I think that this is definitely a case of like Occam's razor, where the simplest solution is probably the right solution.
Well, and that's the thing with a lot of unsolved mysteries is I kept looking at all of them, and the more you look at them and talk about them, you go, the most plausible explanation, and sometimes the real explanation, is the most boring, mundane reality.
And there's this I can't think of the word, but there's this theory that's basically like, I think it's like Jung, possibly, Carl Jung, that came up with this, but that we can't accept coincidences. So our brain tries to make sense of it and link coincidences together.
Yeah. Okay, so is this the thing is like we're story-driven creatures, so we have to have, everything has to have meaning.
Yes.
It has to follow in a logical pattern.
Exactly.
I've heard it too, but I have no idea who
I'm pretty
came
sure
from.
it's Jung, but yeah. So for example, so we can accept that she got on the roof, but then it's, but how did she get to the tank? But oh my gosh, but how did she close the lid? And it's just, maybe it was just a coincidence that the lid fell down. It was a 1 in a million chance, but it happened. But our brains won't let us accept this 1 in a million chance could have happened, so we have to look for a deeper meaning with it. It has to have been something else.
Or we construct the narrative that the lid could not possibly have come down, so how did she get in there?
Exactly.
And all of this stuff. Like, because we need to make it more interesting, basically, than it really is.
But it's so interesting. That's such an interesting one. That video is creepy of her in the elevator, though. I remember seeing it like around the time it came out. It's very creepy.
That's actually the case that got me into true crime.
Really?
And into like unsolved mystery. Yes. Like I got in way late in the game, like a couple years ago. And it was that one that I was like, dude, I need to find out everything about
I've
this.
been obsessed with crime and true crime ever since I was like a little kid.
I think I've had it in the back of my mind and stuff, and I've always had, like, my grandmother always had those, like, weird shows on, and I always watched them, and they always scared me. But I didn't actively pursue it for quite a long time, because I guess I was a little bit scared of it.
Yeah, and I always liked and my mom always loved murder mysteries. And so I loved murder mysteries. And so that's probably where it came from, was just loving murder mysteries, and then turned into, and Murder, She Wrote, and then just like turning into true crime.
Sorry, I don't have true crime stories because I'm
That's
not really
okay.
into true crime.
That was so fun. What's our next episode?